best. Welcome back. You're listening to the Cindy Laverty Show on CRN Talk. And I got to tell you, Rose's Pampered Pets was at my house yesterday, and my dog Sassy just looks so terribly sassy when she comes in from her treatment. And she smells like heaven. So if you want to give your dog a really great treat, call Rose's Pampered Pets and make an appointment. So you can follow the Cindy Laverty Show on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at Cindy Laverty. And you can also, if you're a caregiver and you need some help, you can find me at empoweredcare.com. Empoweredcare.com. There are now 67 million family caregivers providing, ready, $450 billion a year in free care and services for a loved one. So if you need some help, give us a call. All right, my guest today is Michael Friedlander, and we're talking about his book, Detecting the Scam, Nelson Mandela's Gift. Michael, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Nice to be here.
I always love it when somebody's in studio with me. All right, we were talking about the duck school and why this is so important that we, focus on what we intuitively know. Why don't we listen to our intuition? I know you're not a psychologist, but come on.
Yeah, good question. Except, I've said before that I've had clients over the years whose intuition was absolutely always wrong. So, I mean, I think you've got to figure out how good your intuition is before you follow it. Yeah.
Well, maybe his intuition was right and he just wasn't listening to it. That's possible. No, it was just wrong. Okay, well, I'd like to think he's rare.
And, if there was a phone-in show here, I'm sure he's listening. He'd probably call in and dispute that.
All right, well, let me ask you this. Why, in your experience in business and researching this book, why do you think we are afraid to do the right thing?
Because it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. You got to walk through the fire to get to the other side.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to sacrifice by doing the right thing, and people don't like to sacrifice.
I mean, on a smaller level, I am always astounded when I see, these videos that show up on the news, of a child being physically beaten up and bullied at school, and everybody's standing around watching. It makes me crazy.
Yeah.
It really makes me crazy.
I think it's, this sounds a bit of a cliche maybe, but I think it's about leadership. I really believe that it's about leadership. I've done quite a lot of work in what makes people commit white-collar crime. And the criminologists point out that white-collar crime occurs because these people find themselves in an environment in which it's okay to do what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And in the case of school bullying, I think that because kids can get away with it, they do it.
Right.
And I think that if the schools really took a much harder and harsher line against those who are bullying, it may stop a little bit, but they don't.
Right.
And it's not enough to say, don't do it. You've got to stand up and make clear.
Well, there have to be consequences.
No, that's true. I mean, one of the really interesting things, just to get back to the business schools for a second, everybody seems to think if you have an honor code, that's the answer. Or code of ethics. Well, Enron had a 65-page code of ethics, which just wasted a lot of trees.
If you printed it out.
Yeah. And, until the leaders stand up and say, here's a code of ethics, but this is why we have it, and this is why you have to follow it. And if you don't follow it, there are going to be consequences. I believe that bullying in school occurs because kids think they can get away with it.
And they do.
And they do. And that's the fault of the school administration.
Yeah. They're not going to like hearing you say that.
I don't care, yeah.
They're all in school today anyway. They're not listening. Okay. I want to get back to Nelson Mandela's gifts. He was imprisoned for 27 years.
That's right.
And yet he still had power from prison. How did he do that?
Well, he had this moral authority that was recognized, and there's this great story. I don't know how much time we have, but in 1985, he'd been in prison for 21 years, and South Africa was in an absolute crisis.
Right.
The Soweto kids uprising had occurred.
Yes.
And there was this young generation of black kids who were angry beyond words. And there was a growing movement around the world that he should be released. Incidentally, there was a Republican senator called Dick Cheney who opposed his release. Ronald Reagan opposed his release. Margaret Thatcher opposed his release. But the world generally...
We're not doing politics, Michael. We told that.
No, but historically, it's really, really interesting that the world, although not the political leaders, wanted his release. So the South African government had to do something. Massive violence happening. So the President Botha at that time, came up with a plan that he thought was totally brilliant. He would offer Mandela his freedom if he renounced violence. And he'd offer Mandela's friends their freedom if he renounced violence. He made this offer in Parliament, and a reply was smuggled out of Robben Island 4 or 5 days later. And Mandela's daughter delivered his reply to an absolutely packed soccer stadium in Soweto.
Right.
And what Mandela essentially...
I think a movie was made about this.
I mean, this was amazing. Okay, and what Mandela said effectively is that his freedom and the freedom of his people were indivisible. And that while he loves freedom, he loves their freedom more. And if Botha wants him to renounce violence, then Botha's got to renounce violence. He's got to renounce apartheid. He's got to remove all of these laws. He's got to release people from prison. And Mandela won't agree to be released until his people were released. So he's sitting in jail, and he now adds to this enormous moral authority. And as I write in the book, by a strange irony, by refusing the president's offer, the president became his prisoner.
Right.
Their roles sort of became reversed.
Right.
So here you had a black leader in prison whose moral authority and stature was growing, not diminishing. So the answer to your question is, how did he do it while he was in prison? Well, he led by example.
Yeah.
You know, which was amazing. I mean, it gives me goosebumps when you think about it. You know, it's
absolutely. But you know, I think. Do you think he just was born with this kind of strength and this kind of internal conviction? I mean, do you think that people are born with that? It's very, very rare.
Well, if you read the book, I talk about how his father had this great sense of fairness,
right,
and great sense of dignity,
right.
And Mandela wanted to be. He hated unfairness,
right. Well, and there are some leaders in the world who are like that, but there aren't a lot. So we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. You're listening to the Cindy Laverty Show. I'll be right back. I found the